Hey guys, what's going on? This is going to be more or less of an impromptu video because there were some changes that have happened to the tier sets. Some of them I've covered on this channel and some of them I haven't yet, but I just want to walk through those changes and talk about how they have, been updated for better or for worse. So this is kind of impromptu. I don't really have a script for this, but I will probably have some footage of what I'm talking about being displayed, so feel free to use the timestamp below to kind of skip around. We're going to talk about, I think, 5 of the 6 tanks because VDH is being reworked in the next couple of weeks, so I don't really want to dive into that before they do that because it just feels like a waste of time. Anyways, let's just dive right in. Funny enough, for the Blood Death Knight, I was actually just going to do a video about this. I was in the process of recording when these changes happened, so I'm going to have to postpone that video for a little bit and kind of rework how I'm going to explore this kind of talent or tier setup along with the, talent tree. Like I said, we're mostly going to just cover tanks here. So they changed it. Consuming runic power has a chance to cause your hard strike to apply Ashen Decay. They've removed the aspect of Bone Shield from this. They replaced Bone Shield charges with runic power. This at first seemed better, and I guess in a way it is kind of. So basically how the set worked previously was when you consume a Bone Shield charge, when you get autoed and you take a hit and a Bone Shield charge drops, you had about a 7% chance to gain a buff of Ashen Decay, causing your next Heart Strike to apply that buff as a debuff to your target, as well as any other target hit by Heart Strike, reducing the damage they dealt to you by 10%, and of course increasing your damage by 20%. They have changed that to runic power. Now, the issue with this is that runic power a little bit more consistent, but it won't change as much between single target and AoE, because the only real way you dump runic power as a Blood Death Knight is through Death Strike. Now, of course, you have things like Death Coil that can spend it. You have other things like Bone Storm that could spend it. Most people, if you're a DK main and you laugh at that, we all know why. So you have these certain abilities that will drop runic power, but more often than not, your primary way of dumping your runic power is through Death Strike. But that is a finite source. It's not going to happen quicker based on the amount of mobs you're pulling. You're essentially GCD locked based on how much runic power you can generate and how much you can dump outside of CD windows. So in terms of AoE, this set's going to, from basically target dummy testing, it feels weaker. The proc chance is a little bit lower. It's less consistent. Like I said before, Bone Shield charge dropping was about a 7% chance. When you're looking at Death Strike, it's like it almost feels like, from my short testing on this, it looks like, it's about every 8th Death Strike you might get the proc. So I think this is a nerf in a way, because in AoE, when it was Bone Shield charges, the more mobs you pull and the quicker you consume Bone Shield charges, you had a very, very high proc rate or procs per minute because you were consuming Bone Shield charges faster. And that is completely detached from how much runes you can actually generate and spend, or runic power, I should say. So this feels like a nerf. I'm going to have to do some Mythic Plus testing, and I'm going to have to revisit the talents I was kind of speculating on based around Bone Shield. I'm almost wondering if Bone Storm could be the play, but because of runic power, you probably are going to lean a little bit more into generation if you want this to apply quickly. I just feel like it's going to make the set more consistent in single target, but it's going to feel probably worse in Mythic Plus. So we're going to have to see. There was a lot of experimenting I did with Soul Reaper, as well as a different talent setup for the spec tree, including Rune Tap, which may still be the case with the runic power because you're able to generate more runes. But basically, I'll talk about this in a separate video because there's a lot I can go into, and I really want to test this in Mythic Plus and not just at target dummies. But that was the change with the Blood Death Knight. Moving on, we do have the Vengeance Demon Hunter. I'm not going to really talk about it. The only thing they applied, they added a new effect to it that applies an aura. We don't really know how this is going to interact with the class because we don't know much about the Demon Hunter rework. Hopefully we have more details soon. Guardian Druid, they thankfully made this set kind of really strong all of a sudden. So how it worked before is, I did a video on this, but basically whenever you used Rage of the Sleeper during the buff's active time, you would basically build an absorption shield, and then once Rage of the Sleeper ended, it would give you that absorption shield. And it was essentially a 10% DR. So it would absorb 10% of the damage that you took, absorbing it instead of having you actually take it, right? So it's roughly a 10% DR as long as the shield persists. But it was only from the shield. So if you had something like Ursoc's Fury or some kind of other absorption from a trinket, the absorb value wouldn't get used up. It would, basically other absorbs took precedence. Now that was fine with the 2 set, but the 4 set is where you would lose damage, because the 4 set causes it to not only be absorbed, but also to reflect the damage. It would reflect that 10% damage. The issue with that is because you would have other absorbs that were being consumed first, you wouldn't actually fully use the Blazing Thorns from the 4 set that would reflect the damage, and it ended up being kind of a waste. So what they did this time around, or what they've improved on, is they made it so it now is going to absorb 25% of the damage that's dealt to you, and it's now going to reflect 100% of that damage. Now, it's weird the way it's worded here, because it's not going from 10% to 100%. It's basically causing 100% of the 25% damage reflection from the 2 set back at the attacker. So what this means is it's going to consume the shield quicker, which is just, I think, all around good. Another little thing that they didn't mention in these notes is that the shield buff time, it used to last for 30 seconds. It now lasts for 45. So they extended the amount of time that it actually lasts for. And Rage of the Sleeper lasts for up to 15 seconds. So basically, you now have like somewhat of like 100% coverage, right? Like if you happen to keep the shield up for 45 seconds, you're then going right back into your Rage of the Sleeper. So basically this got turned into Rage of the Sleeper outside of like a mini version of it, because it was like a 40% version of what Rage was, and now it's going to be just like you have Rage of the Sleeper until the absorb gets fully consumed. I think this actually is scary strong. If the numbers are right, we'll have to see how it translates to Mythic Plus, but this is going to be pretty sizable in terms of damage and AoE. Now in single target, it's hard to say. It's at least going to get consumed, since it's now going to absorb more damage per hit. Still pretty weak in raid, I would say, but it's definitely in a much better spot than it was literally 20 hours ago or whatever. So all around, good changes for Bear. I'll have to do, again, more testing this weekend once Mythic Plus opens back up, but for now, we'll leave it at that. Brewmaster, so they changed it to say, this is the 2 set bonus, by the way. So Breath of Fire deals 20% bonus damage to Shadow Flame and causes you, the Brewmaster, to heal for 50% of all fire damage dealt, and they changed all to your. Now, that's indicating to me that there were things that were interacting with the set that wasn't supposed to, probably trinkets or potions, which is weird, because from my testing, I tested fire damage trinkets, and those seemed not to work. Maybe there was a specific item that was working, or maybe there was a potion or consumable that was allowing the Brewmaster to actually get additional damage from fire that was counting as healing. But in my experience, it wasn't. Or maybe there's something that interacts inside of a dungeon that I'm not aware of. But this is pretty much not a change from my understanding. So not much to worry about here with the Brewmaster. Still just staying the same. Now, the Prop Paladin was a tank that I haven't really tested yet, but there were a lot of complaints about how weak the 2 set bonus was, and I guess the 4 set as well. So the big change here was that it used to be a DR that was stacking, and it used to give armor, 1% armor per stack up to 10 times. A couple issues with the set. Takes a very long time to accumulate 10 stacks by casting Judgment, and the armor means that it's only effective against physical damage, which is obviously not all types of damage. And again, the accumulation just takes too long to actually stack up. And then as soon as you hit 10, you're consuming it anyways. So what they've done is they've doubled the value, but they moved it to just being a flat DR. So it's a 2% per stack up to 5 times. So this is really strong. And then your next concentration cast will be empowered. So its healing and its damage are going to be increased by 200%. It's going to have a larger radius, which means that the Paladin has a little bit more freedom to kind of move around. No pun intended. And then your stacks reset once that consecration ends. So there's a little bit of min-maxing here with like knowing when you place on an empowered consecration, staying in it the whole time and waiting for it to pretty much expire before you refresh it. Because if you refresh consecration earlier, it'll just get rid of your DR. So you kind of have to pay attention to it, which is my personal gripe, but that'll be for the video. I'll save that for the video. And then they double the value of the 4 set. So your abilities have a chance to deal 40% bonus damage as healing or fire when you're inside of your consecration. Now, this is all around just a buff. It's not really changing how it's interacting like maybe with Guardian Druid or Blood Death Knight. This is just straight up up to a 10% flat DR while you remain in your consecration stacks. You're going to accumulate the empowered consecration twice as fast because it's being cut down from 10 stacks to 5 stacks. And of course, they're doubling the value of the bonus damage from 20% to 40%. So nothing really to complain about here, though the biggest gripe that I do here is that it's, well, tied to consecration, which feels bad. Anyways, I'll be doing a video in the near future about this. I just was focusing on some of the other tanks this last weekend. This next time around, I will be testing out the prop Paladin. And last but not least, let's talk about Warrior. I'm a little sad about this set because I think it's a pretty big nerf to the single target damage it was providing the Warrior, but I think in Mythic Plus, it's going to look really, really strong. So something that I brought up in the video, if you didn't watch it, I recommend go checking it out because I think it's still pretty relevant, especially with some of the theory crafting. But what they did is instead of the 2-set bonus instantly consuming your dots and doing 100% of the damage, they nerfed it down to only 40%. So a pretty massive hit to the Fervid Bite buff. This is obviously like directly like a 60% reduction. The other problem I have with this set currently is that it still consumes the bleed. So in terms of Thunderous Roar, you're actually losing damage from the Thunderous Roar dot because obviously when you use Thunderous Roar, it applies a dot to the target, which is where a lot of the damage comes from. And if you're instantly consuming it and only doing 40% of the damage, well, you're kind of like wasting the cooldown. Now, luckily, when you take a look at the 4 set, instead of only being reduced by 1 second, it's being reduced by 3 seconds. So instead of being now like knocking it from a 1 minute cooldown to a 50-second cooldown, you can get this as low as probably 30 seconds. So you're using Thunderous Roar a lot. I don't think it'll really change the build. I think you'll still probably play like a lot of like Bloodborne based, like bleed based, Thunderous Roar based talents. I don't know how I like it in single target. I think that's a pretty big nerf, though. I will say this. The issue with the Prot Warrior set is that the DR was only being applied to the target you consume the bleeds on, which meant that you were only able to maintain maybe 1 to 2 DRs on a target realistically. But what they're doing now is when you consume those bleeds, it's giving you the DR. So everything that's attacking you is now doing anywhere between 10 and 16% reduced damage. In terms of survivability, especially in Mythic Plus, great change. In terms of damage from the tier set, massive, massive, massive nerf in terms of Fervid Bites, but we're going to see a lot more damage coming from Thunderous Roar. So Thunderous Roar, you're going to use it in a big AoE pull, and then you're going to refrain from tab targeting because you want the dot to actually fully tick out, because if you're consuming it instantly and only dealing 40% of the remaining damage, that feels pretty sus, as the kids say. So those were the changes with the Prot set. Pretty good changes all around. I think they're moving in a good direction with Prot Paladin, Prot Warrior, Guardian Druid, and Blood Death Knight. Well, I'm a little skeptical on the Blood Death Knight still, but we'll have to do some testing. Anyways, I hope that kind of answers some questions, or maybe if you just don't know how to read, I did it for you. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about these changes in the comments down below. I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.